Yeah, I see you shared it. Okay, so today we're going to continue talking about our Wi-Fi live stream sessions here. One of the topics we want to talk about was something that comes up a lot, routers versus access points. When people call us and they say they need more routers, their Wi-Fi is not good enough, they need to get more routers. So what are they saying? What are they asking? And what in reality, what do they need?
Yeah. So, this is one of those things that I guess our topics for Fridays, right? What we're going to be talking about. I just kind of want to reiterate that is the things that we come across with a lot of, we get a lot of questions from different customers from everywhere, not just from our brand, but just in general. All these different types of questions that we end up answering a lot of the times, and we get a lot of people that, a lot of different individuals ask us, hey, what is your, what kind of routers do you have? They're calling access points routers, and they're misusing the names.
Right.
We even see it on reviewers. Reviewers call access points routers, and an access point is it's a layer 2 device. And that's really it.
It's a bridge. It's a bridge to the wired network, basically, right?
Yeah, that's all it is. It's a point of entry from a wireless device to the wired network.
Whereas a router has some more functionality built into it on the wired side to do like DHCP, NATing from the public internet to the private network, firewalling and things like that. So even though VLAN, yes, exactly. Ability to route different VLANs on the wire. So there's differences there, and one of the things that isn't built into a router is good Wi-Fi. A lot of times, there, of course, there's some out there that are good, but they're more into the marketing of that thing. It has the latest standard. Some of these things are expensive. Some of these Wi-Fi 6 routers are probably $400 or $500, but maybe not that much for consumer routers, maybe in the $300 to $400 range. But in reality, that one device is not going to cover your whole house. So you really want to spend as little as possible for that router, and not even have Wi-Fi built in most cases.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, because we know from experience that every home is going to need at least 2 to 3 wired access points in different locations throughout the home. Now, people just go out, they'll buy the Eros and they'll throw them up, and it's working great today, but then next week it stops working. They don't know why. There's no way to troubleshoot it. They have to unplug them every day to get it to reset. That's the kind of thing you don't want to worry about, especially with working from home. So the best way to do it is to get a wired router. We've been using these MikroTik routers lately, and they have wireless ones also, but mostly we're using the wired ones, and then we're hooking those into our ingenious cloud switches and cloud access points to finish out the network.
But they'll work with any network.
Yeah, they work with any network, but I guess the bottom line is, if you are going to own your own router, buy one that doesn't have Wi-Fi built in, and then deploy the correct number of access points for your house or building that you're going to need.
Which that could be pretty difficult to find anymore. A router without a consumer router anyway.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to find a consumer router without Wi-Fi.
Right.
So you could turn it off, right? You could turn off the Wi-Fi, just use the router functionality. But it depends on the router that you're buying too. So if you're buying more of an expensive router, you're probably buying it for the Wi-Fi technology. I mean, that's kind of what I've seen on the market, where they're costing $600, $700. You're buying like Wi-Fi 6. It's tri-band. It has some major antennas, things like that. But again, that comes down to will it cover your whole house? So,
and in most cases, no. And then you spent all that money on that router. You're not gonna want to go buy another one. You're gonna try to use extenders or something that's just gonna make it worse.
We've had customers that have multiple routers for more coverage, but I think the bigger issue, kind of what we're talking about, is just that when we get calls, people are asking us for routers, but they actually mean access points.
Right.
And there's a major difference between the two. And that actually we've seen that happen with in residential use, also in business use.
Yeah.
Small hotels and things like that, where they don't really understand the differences, which is surprising if they're trying to install it. But yeah, you have to be really careful. But access points are totally different from routers. Routers, I'd like to explain kind of the differences there between the two. Than an access point. An access point is just passing that data through. And you can direct that data through the access point to, in particular ways, but really the router's doing all the work at the back end.
Yeah, and another thing about that, if you are using a wireless router, say in a hotel or something, you want to make sure you turn off that Wi-Fi interface because basically, if let's say you have that wireless router down in the lobby and people are coming into the hotel, they're connecting to that router on the Wi-Fi, that's going to slow that whole router down, which may be used for the whole hotel. So you definitely want to turn it off and then put access points throughout the hotel so it spreads the load. Instead of having people come in, they could be coming into the lobby and slowing the whole hotel down if they have that Wi-Fi turned on in the router.
Right. Yeah, and you really see that more on the very small hotels.
Yeah.
Not the bigger hotels, right? They're not doing that.
Right, of course not. But
we've ran into that where, like small, we'll work with the owners, right? And the owners are, I'm going to throw this router in here, and that's going to provide.
I'm saving money. I don't want to have to buy another one. I'm saving money.
Yeah.
I'm going to use this. It's here. Yeah.
So I think we run into that, but yeah, just in general, there's differences. Like I said, even with reviewers that we find they call access points routers, they're not routers whatsoever.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Now, the other thing about the routers, like, so you may just use the router, cable modem router combination from your internet service provider, and that you have to pay a monthly rental on that thing, but a lot of people just do it because it's easy. But you still want to go in there and turn off the Wi-Fi once you set up a good Wi-Fi network with, what access points throughout your house. So you can still go in there. You can turn off the Wi-Fi. You could even put them into bridge mode and use another router, like a more powerful router maybe, while using that ISP cable modem router combination. So yeah, again, turn off the Wi-Fi and the router. A lot of these. I just noticed that Comcast Xfinity has a 2.5 gigabit cable modem router combination now, so they're getting faster and faster. And so some of these routers you may have that are just maybe 1 or 2 years old, they can't handle that connection anymore. Either they don't have the physical port that can do 2.5 gigabits, which almost nothing can right now, or enough horsepower to pass that traffic, not the traffic at the gigabit speeds. One of them that we found that works well is the Microtech Hex S. I know we're both using that one, and it has enough horsepower to easily, full gigabit internet connection without slowing down, and it's reasonably priced under $100. So that's a good solution that we found worked. I did try a bunch of other routers, Microtech, some slower ones, and they weren't able to pass a full gigabit. They're only doing maybe 300 meg, and a lot of people run up against that. So make sure that whatever router you're using, if you're buying your own, make sure it can pass the traffic of that connection that you have. So that's another thing we wanted to touch on.
My current setup is my ISP modem to my router to a switch to my access points.
Yep.
To the Microtech router. So
so you can.
Modem,
you can segregate networks by putting a router inside. Maybe you're working from home and you wanted to make sure that you're on a completely separate wired network than your family. Then putting that router in there is going to be a way to separate the traffic, right?
Right. Yep.
So that's the way to do it. Okay, so we wanted to also touch on how many SSIDs do I need? Like, so say I'm a hotel owner, or I have like a bunch of condo buildings on a complex. Do I want to have? I want to have one SSID for every single building, right? Or every single apartment.
I love
every
this
apartment.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at one point we were supporting, well, Ingenious in particular. There are other vendors that do this, but
Yeah.
we're supporting up to 16 SSIDs. That sounds, you know, that gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things, but you don't want to set up 16 SSIDs.
No.
Now we support 8 SSIDs, and in some situations you might need 8 SSIDs, but that's a lot of SSIDs
Yeah.
for an access point to. You have to imagine that's the broadcast name, so you're broadcasting 8 names out of there.
The
out of one
beacons,
device.
yeah, it's got to beacon out all those things, and it's reducing the efficiency of that network, right?
Yeah. So so you need a lot of not necessarily a lot of horsepower, but you're definitely draining
Performance.
the performance of the AP when you have a lot of SSIDs.
Yeah.
You can get away with 3 or 4 in smaller networks, but in larger networks, you probably want to kind of minimize that a little bit. I've had requests for 40 SSIDs,
Crazy.
and they're like, "Oh, you're limited to 8. I need 40." It's like you don't want to use that many SSIDs, and the question is, why do you want that many SSIDs, right? And we kind of already know, but the reason you look for what we find anyway is when somebody's asking for multiple SSID is that they're trying to segment the traffic, the wireless traffic, and then they'll segment the traffic through the network. But that's typically the reason. So I'll give you an example. So one access point could broadcast a couple different names, Wi-Fi names like sales. The idea is that I want the individuals from sales to connect to sales, the individuals from tech support to connect to tech support, and the individuals from accounting to connect to accounting.
Right.
And what you do is you segment that traffic, and you provide them the resources that they need to do their function within the company. And you can do other things. You can bandwidth control, limit the resources, give them the particular like printers that they need, things like that. That's why you would want multiple SSIDs. That's typically the reason.
Limit the resources, right? Yeah. And you use VLANs to do that, or just segregate, use station isolation, or you could put different routed interfaces between or something like that if you wanted to.
Yeah, or client isolation or L2 isolation.
Yeah, L2 isolation.
That's another.
It's usually good enough for like small hotels that it's going to segregate the traffic. There's more, you can get crazy with VLANs and things like that, but yeah, I mean, so what you really want is maybe like 2 or 3 SSIDs, one for the staff, one for guests, and maybe one more for let's say Internet of Things devices. That you want to keep separate, because you don't know if these things are safe or what they're doing, right? So you can segregate them that way, but you don't want to use SSIDs to segregate physical spaces like buildings, apartment rooms, or whatever you call them, rooms in a hotel, things like that. You don't want to use SSIDs in that way because it just gets out of control.
Yeah, like in multifamily units where you have trying to separate out those condominiums by SSID, which is, if it's on a small scale, that's okay. But then you have to, if you have a multifamily unit is a really good example, because if you have a large building with multifamily units, when they leave their home and they're in the lobby or they're at the pool, or they're in different areas of the complex, what are they connecting to? Are they connecting to a different SSID? Is it the lobby SSID?
Yeah.
Connecting to the pool SSID at that point? We're constantly changing SSIDs. You also have to consider roaming. When you're roaming from, say, I'm within my condo and I walk outside through the hallway and I go down to the lobby and then I go into these different areas, like maybe a business area or complex that they may have. You have to think about how they roam and things like that. So when you have different SSIDs, you're asking the client device to associate different SSIDs.
Yeah. Do more work. And the other thing is, not only does the access point, the hardware have to do more work for those SSIDs. The administrators will too, because they can make mistakes setting these up. They could forget to put a passphrase in or something like that, and they'll have to go in and manually fix all those instead of just having 1, 2, or 3 SSIDs that they can set up once and be done with.
Well, even worse, like they set up the VLANs aren't set up correctly between the different SSIDs.
Oh, yeah.
For example. So that's another one that So it just gets it starts to get complicated when you have a lot of different SSIDs. Multiple SSIDs is good, and the reason it just depends on how you utilize them, right? So, like you brought up the I might want to have an SSID that's only broadcasting on 2.4 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And it's not broadcasting on 5 gigahertz.
Right.
So I can really separate that out. And another thing that you can do is you can, for some of those IoT devices, they're not roaming. So you don't have to worry about roaming with those particular devices. So you can have SSIDs in particular areas that are just for those devices. I mean, I have that set up here.
Yep.
Where my garage door openers are on 2.4.
Yeah.
Don't want them roaming to other access points. I don't want them flip-flopping back through different access points. So I have one access point SSID just on 2.4 gigahertz, but that SSID is turned off on all the other access points.
Right. Yep. That's a way to do it. But summing it up, the Wi-Fi clients they're meant to, if you want roaming over multiple access point network, then you should have one SSID, because that's how the device is going to roam. It's going to roam as it moves around. It's going to connect to the most efficient access point it can find, right? So and it's based on the client, but we talked about before that there's mechanisms that you can use on the controller side too. But so you want to have basically a small number of SSIDs. Don't go crazy with that. But what can we do instead of having lots of SSIDs? We can use something like MyPSK to segregate users.
Yeah. So exactly. So MyPSK is a good tool that you can use to have a single SSID, but you're putting the individual client devices on their own pre-shared key, and you can actually put them on their own pre-shared key and also put them on their own VLAN as well. Yeah. So in the case of a student housing, or in the case of like a multi-family apartments, you could have one SSID. Maybe it's the complex's name, and everybody's using the same SSID. So the roaming part is no issue, because you're constantly using the same SSID as you walk through the property. So you're on that. You never have to change the SSID. It's broadcasting one, and every individual client device is on has its own. Well, not every client device, but every user, has their own pre-shared key, their own password. Yep. And also on their own VLAN as well.
Right. So that does a couple things. It secures the network for like authentication to that one user, but also if you also use VLANs there, then you're also making it more efficient, because you have less broadcast traffic on that network, right? So that one user's has his own broadcast domain there, but that can get complicated. Not everyone wants to do that either. But it's a great way. MyPSK or any of the other vendors have their own solutions where you have a one-to-one pre-shared key for each user. Makes it a really good way to manage any type of campus, even hotels. Like you could take a spreadsheet of pre-shared keys and just give those out to all your users, and if someone's bad, you can delete them from the list. So that helps out in a lot of situations.
You can actually set up basically time frames as well. Expiration dates.
Right.
Start times, and so if it's if it's in an apartment complex or a hotel, perhaps. You can set the time frame of that PSK or that pre-shared key is you can set it where in student housing, when somebody's, when a student
Students
starts
checking
the
out.
semester,
Yeah.
the start date is this time,
Yep.
the end date is this particular time. So that's another great feature about MyPSK.
So you can do it on. Let's talk about for a hotel. So you could, when the guest checks in, you could say, okay, you're here for 3 days. Here's your MyPSK key. And after 3 days, it's not going to work anymore. He can't give it to somebody else. People can't be out in the parking lot that aren't guests getting on the network because they know the pre-shared key from last week. So that's a great way for a hotel to do it too.
Yeah. I ran into hotels yet that are doing it, but we do see it in like education,
Yeah.
and MDU or multi family units or multi-dwelling units.
Yep.
That's where we see it a lot. Student housing is a big one. So yeah, that is a great tool to be able to implement in like these larger deployments where you're keeping everything secure. It's genius. Everybody walks in. Everybody knows the Wi-Fi passcode.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody knows the pre-shared key. Right.
Right.
So they could share. Your employees could share that pre-shared key with anybody.
Yeah.
And they could have access to your network
From out in the parking
maybe
lot.
They don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't know any better that
Yeah.
if I share this, I'm sharing a lot of information with somebody.
Right.
But with my pre-shared key, you can actually set the number of devices that can use that pre-shared key as well. So.
And you can monitor it because if you see a certain user that's doing something weird on there, you can shut them off. And if they're sending a lot of traffic, they have like multiple devices connected from all different access points. Then it's probably not them, or they're doing something weird. They gave out that key. So you can kind of monitor it and shut it down, which makes things more secure and easier to manage. Any of these one-time pre-shared key systems are really something you should really look at. If you're worried about security, which everyone should be, I guess. All right, so we also wanted to talk about guest networks and like some of the. So this again would be for a hotel. Or even, maybe a house, you could set up a guest network that, people that came over could use that's not part of your main network. In most cases, you'll go to a hotel or something, you'll see, you'll connect to the Wi-Fi, it'll put up like terms of agreement that you have to agree to, right? So that's like a splash page, right? And you have to click agree, and then it'll do a redirect that will send you off either to the page you're going to, or maybe the hotel's website or something like that. So that's all part of the captive portal on the guest network, right?
Yeah. So there's captive portal. So there's in regards to Genius, there's really two steps. There's captive portal, and then so you can choose your authentication type. So it can be, you can just click through, for example, or you can use a cloud radius built into our management system, so you could use cloud authentication. You can use custom radius if you need to.
Yep.
We even have the voucher service, which we get some users use that. We're starting to get more and more people use the voucher service. Yep. And then you can use like social login.
Yeah.
And then, that's the authentication side, and then you can create your page with your terms and conditions when they access the network. We use WYSIWYG, so that is basically you can use HTML to build like the splash page, or there's like templates and things like that, and that I think other vendors also.
Yeah, so in years past, like something like that, the splash page, the redirects and terms, that may have been done by like a gateway device, like a Nomadix or something. But with these newer, cloud-based systems, a lot of this stuff is built in, so you may not need that gateway device anymore, saving you a lot of money, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So now these the guest network with captive portals built in. It's run through the access points. It's not relying on the cloud either, is it? Or does it need to be connected? I guess it would have to be anyway. They're not going to have access to the internet without it, so.
Yeah, I mean, if the device loses connectivity to the cloud,
yeah,
but not necessarily to the internet for some reason, because of DNS maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still gonna work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, because it's doing it locally. It's doing that guest network locally. So when you enable that guest network, what does it do? It's doing like a double NAT. It's like setting up an entirely different subnet for that guest network.
Well, it depends on how you set it up. So, we just talked about the multiple SSIDs, right? So if you have two SSIDs, you have a staff SSID and you have a guest SSID. The guest SSID, you can enable NAT
or bridging, right? The way your system's set up. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can set up NAT and you can set up L2 isolation or client isolation on that SSID that has the captive portal and the splash page and so on. So yeah, so you can easily set it up.
And for smaller hotels, that's way easier than working with VLANs, right? Like, so they have that guest network that's totally isolated from their business network. They're not going to be able to hit their printers or anything like that. It's totally isolated, and then the users on that guest network are isolated from each other with that level 2 enabled. So exactly. that makes it easy for like smaller businesses to set up a safe network, and then they can onboard them with that captive portal. Even using built-in authentication, lots of methods, this is instead of putting in that pre-shared key, right? So this is like in an open environment where you don't want to have to hand out that key, but you can authenticate through the captive portal using, like you said, the Ingenious has the cloud radius built in, which is like 802.1x local authentication. Without having to have any infrastructure, you can put users right into the Genius Cloud usernames, and they can sign in through that captive portal.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That method is used a lot, right? Because it just makes it easier on your guests when they come into the hotel. They don't have to, set doing a password and all kinds of things. So it just really depends on the experience that you want your customers to have.
Yeah.
But it can be set up in any way.
Yeah, so let's say you had a 50-room hotel, you could set up 50 usernames and assign them each a password, and those guests, you know exactly who was using it because they're in that room, right? That they're the ones that rented that room. And then every time you reset the password and give them a new password, right? So you know exactly who's using it.
Exactly.
And wherever they are in the hotel, they could be roaming, whatever. You'll see room 101, like, is over here doing this, So you could do that. That's a pretty cool mechanism. Most hotels are very basic. If they have a lot of them don't even have passwords anymore because it just makes it difficult for the customer. And I know, like, a lot of users don't like captive portals and splash pages because it may, log them out after an hour or a day or whatever. And they have to go through the process again, right?
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, I think.
Yeah.
Nobody. I don't like going through the process, but I know you kind of have to do it. So
you kind of have to. The hotels the chains require that. A lot of them put up the terms, and to do that, you need that captive portal.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think we had hit on some good topics today. We'll go ahead and end this now, and please remember to like and subscribe for more help with Wi-Fi. See you later, Bryan.